The wind carried the scent of pine and fresh soil as Clara Hartley walked down Main Street, her arms wrapped around a small paper bag from Millie's Bakery. The early morning sun washed the mountains in gold, and the sleepy town of Riverside Springs was just beginning to stir awake. But Clara had already been up for hours, baking, delivering, helping, doing what she always did best, caring for everybody but herself. She wasn't thin like the other girls her age, but she carried herself with a warm strength, the kind that made strangers feel safe. Yet for reasons she had never understood, that same strength became the thing people mocked her for. A group of local teenagers lingered outside the general store. Clara tried walking past them quietly, eyes lowered, hoping today would be different. Hoping they wouldn't find a reason to comment. But as always, hope did little in Riverside Springs. There she is, one of them snickered. Corful boys. Sidewalk's about to cave in. The others burst into laughter, loud and sharp, slicing through the quiet morning. Clara paused for just half a heartbeat, but she didn't look at them. She had learned long ago that reacting only made things worse. Instead, she took a breath and kept walking, shoulders squared like her grandmother had once taught her. You carry your weight with pride, child. Grandma Me used to say, as it doesn't measure your worth. But Grandma Me wasn't here anymore, and Clara's worth, at least in this small town, seemed invisible. She reached the bakery and pushed through the door, breathing out a little shakily as the warm scent of cinnamon rolls wrapped around her. Millie, the owner, looked up from kneading dough. "Good morning, sweetheart," Millie said gently, her eyes scanning Clara's face the way a mother reads her child's sadness. "They bothering you again?" Clara forced a small smile. "It's okay." Millie's hands paused. "You shouldn't have to be." Clara didn't know what to say to that. So instead, she asked what needed to be done, slipping into the comfort of routine. She worked all morning at the bakery, packing orders, greeting customers, helping elderly folks to their cars. People liked her kindness, admired her work ethic. But when it came to seeing her as equal to the other women in town, thin, polished, socially approved, they drew a line in the sand she could never cross. By noon, Clara wiped her hands on her apron, her long brown hair pinned back in its usual loose bun. Millie approached her with a knowing look. "Take the afternoon off. You've been here since dawn." Clara hesitated, but Millie insisted, and Clara finally agreed. Stepping outside, she felt the crisp mountain breeze sweep across her face. The laughter from the teenagers had faded, but a different sound replaced it. Voices near the town center, louder than usual. Curious, she walked toward the commotion. A tall stranger stood near the fountain, towering over a group of men who seemed more amused than threatened. He was built like an old oak tree, strong and weathered, with broad shoulders and eyes the color of river rock. His hair was untrimmed, falling just past his ears, and his beard looked like it belonged to someone who lived away from crowds. Clara had never seen him before. "You're the new guy, aren't you?" one of the local men said as he circled the stranger. "The one building a cabin up in Snake Ridge?" The stranger didn't answer right away. His gaze rested on the mountains as if listening for something only he could hear. When he finally spoke, his voice was calm but firm. "Just passing through today. I'll be gone before sundown." His tone wasn't unfriendly, but it wasn't inviting either. Clara sensed he preferred silence over small talk, something she related to deeply. The men, however, weren't interested in peace. Riverside Springs had a way of testing newcomers who didn't fit the mold. "You better watch yourself up there," another man chimed in. "A lot of wolves and rattlers, and, well," he smirked, "well, you're a big guy, but even you might be a snack." The men laughed, the same cruel sound Clara knew too well. She flinched slightly, not because of the joke, but because she recognized the tone used by people who enjoyed feeling powerful. The stranger didn't laugh. He didn't even blink. He just stared at them with steady patience that made the men uneasy. Clara couldn't help but admire that. She turned to leave, but before she could take 2 steps, her foot slid on a small patch of wet pavement. She gasped, arms flailing. The paper bag slipped from her hand and she braced herself for impact. But instead of hitting the ground, her fall was stopped by a firm grip around her wrist. She looked up. The stranger had caught her. "You all right?" he asked, his rough voice softer now. Clara nodded, cheeks burning. Thank you. The group of men behind them burst out laughing again. But this time their target wasn't Clara alone. "Now careful, buddy," one of them sneered. "You don't want that one falling on you." Clara's heart dropped. The familiar sting rose up her throat like a choking heat. She started to pull her wrist back, desperate to escape the humiliation. But the stranger didn't let go immediately. Instead, he turned his head slowly toward the men. Something shifted in his eyes. Something cold, sharp, and utterly unamused. "What did you say?" he asked. The men exchanged glances, surprised. "It was a joke," one said. "Not a very good one," the stranger replied. Clara swallowed hard, unsure what to do. She didn't want a scene. She didn't want anyone defending her. Not here. Not like this. Not like this. Defending her only made her feel like an object of pity, and she had spent her life trying to avoid that feeling. "It's okay," she whispered, more to him than to the men. He shook his head. "And no, it's not." The firmness in his voice stunned. He released her wrist gently, then stepped forward, placing himself between her and the men. "You don't talk to women like that," he said calmly. "Not in front of me." His voice carried the weight of a man who had seen enough cruelty in his life and refused to let any pass unnoticed. The men bristled, their bravado faltering. The tallest one stepped forward and crossed his arms. "And who are you to tell us what to do?" "No one important," the stranger replied. "Just someone who believes respect isn't optional." The silence that followed was thick. Tension crackled in the air like static before a storm. The men muttered something under their breath and walked away, more embarrassed than angry. Clara stared at the stranger in disbelief. No one had ever done that for her, ever. "You didn't have to do that," she whispered. "Yeah," he said. "I did this. I did what to decide." And then he picked up the paper bag she had dropped. "Your cinnamon rolls survived," he said, handing it back with the faintest hint of a smile. Clara couldn't help but return the smile. Small, shy, but real. "Thank you," she said again. "I'm Clara." "Elias," he replied. A simple exchange, brief as a breath. But something in the way he said it felt different, like the beginning of a story she hadn't expected to be part of. Elias nodded to her, then turned to leave. But as he walked away, Clara noticed something that made her heartbeat change. He kept glancing back, as if reassuring himself that she was all right. No one had ever looked at her that way either. She watched him head toward the edge of town, disappearing into the trail leading up toward the ridges. What? But the warmth of that moment lingered in her chest, soft and unfamiliar. That afternoon, the rumor spread fast. "Did you see that mountain man stand up for her?" He practically scared those guys off. Who does he think he is? People talked, not about the cruelty, not about the bullying, but about the audacity of a stranger defending her. Clara ignored the whispers. All she could think about was Elias's expression when he stepped in front of her. Firm, protective, unwavering. Like someone who saw more than what the world chose to see. She didn't know why the memory of that moment made her hands tremble slightly. Or why, for the first time in years, her reflection in the bakery window didn't feel entirely small. For the rest of the day, Clara found herself glancing out the window toward the mountains, wondering if Elias was out there, building his cabin, living his life, not knowing he had shifted something inside her. She didn't know it yet, but this was only the beginning. 2 days passed before Clara saw Elias again, though she found herself thinking about him more often than she cared to admit. She told herself she wasn't expecting anything. She barely knew him after all, but something about the way he had stepped between her and those men stayed with her. Not because he fought for her, but because he didn't hesitate. He didn't ask questions. He didn't look at her body, or judge her, or give her that pitying smile she was so used to. He reacted like a man who simply knew what was right. On the morning of the third day, Clara walked toward the weekly farmer's market, basket in hand. The sky was crisp and bright, the air filled with the smell of roasted corn and apple cider. Vendors lined the roadside with jars of honey, fresh vegetables, handcrafted soaps, and knitted blankets. It was the kind of place Clara usually felt safe, surrounded by neighbors and families. But today, a familiar heaviness followed her, a residue of the laughter she had endured 2 days earlier. She made her usual rounds, picking up eggs from Millie, stopping to chat with Mrs. Levin about her new grandbaby. Everything seemed ordinary until a sudden bang echoed through the square. People turned as a wooden stall collapsed on one side, its support legs snapping like a twig. A young boy, about 10 years old, stood frozen in front of it, his eyes wide with terror. The structure leaned toward him. Clara dropped her basket. Without thinking, she sprinted across the market, her legs pumping harder than she thought they could. She reached the boy just as the top beam came crashing down. Throwing her arms around him, she turned her back to the falling wood, shielding the child with her own body. The beam hit her shoulders with a dull, painful thud. Clara winced but didn't move. All she cared about was keeping the boy safe. People screamed, vendors rushed forward. Several men lifted the beam off her, and Clara slowly pulled away from the boy, who clung to her like he'd been pulled from a nightmare. "You okay, E?" she asked, brushing his hair back gently. He nodded, tears streaking his dirt-smudged face. "Oh, thank you. I couldn't move." "You were very brave," she said warmly. "Anyone would be scared." Mrs. Jensen, the boy's mother, ran over and wrapped her arms around her son, sobbing with relief. She turned to Clara, shaking her head. "You could have been badly hurt." "Clara, honey, what were you thinking?" Clara smiled softly, that he needed someone. Her right shoulder throbbed with each breath, but she hid the pain. She didn't do it to be seen. It was simply in her nature to step in when someone needed help. But someone saw. First, at the edge of the crowd stood Elias. He must have arrived at the market while she was shopping. He stood still, watching, his jaw tight, his expression unreadable. When Clara met his eyes, something warm passed between them, deep, recognizing, almost protective. Elias pushed through the crowd and approached her. "You hurt?" he asked, eyes scanning her shoulder. "It looks worse than it feels." "You're sure?" Her stubborn smile tried to reassure him. But Elias wasn't the type to accept easy answers. Gently, he lifted the edge of her cardigan. She hissed under her breath as he exposed the darkening bruise. "Thought so," he murmured. "That was reckless." Clara frowned. The boy was in danger. They didn't have time to think. Elias looked at her with a mixture of frustration and admiration. "Maybe that's the problem. You think of everyone but yourself." "I'm fine," she said again, but her voice softened because a part of her liked that he cared. He didn't argue. Instead, he said to come with me. "Where?" "To the lake." Clara blinked. "The lake?" He nodded once, the faintest smile tugging at one corner of his mouth. "Trust me." She hesitated, glancing around the market. People watched them, some surprised, others whispering behind cupped hands. A few women glared, clearly irritated that the rugged newcomer was giving Clara, of all people, so much attention. Clara swallowed a lump of anxiety. Elias's voice dropped to a softer, firmer tone. "I'll let them." Without waiting for approval, he gently took her injured arm, as carefully as if she were made of glass, and guided her toward the trail leading out of town. Clara felt her chest flutter. No one had touched her with that kind of gentleness in years. The trail wound through tall pines until they reached the lake, a hidden sapphire surrounded by moss-covered boulders. Elias knelt at the edge, dipped a cloth in the cold water, and turned to Clara. "Sit," he said quietly. She did. He pressed the cool cloth against her bruise. Clara winced before the cold numbed the ache, soothing the pulsing pain. "You didn't have to do this," she whispered. "I know," he replied. "That's why I'm doing it." Clara's heart trembled. No one had ever spoken to her like that. No one had ever shown her this kind of steady, patient kindness. "You barely know me," she said. Elias paused, his hand still holding the damp cloth against her shoulder. Ew. Clara looked at him, surprised. "You do?" He nodded. "I know you ran faster than anyone else to save that boy. I know you didn't care about getting hurt. I know you're strong, but you think you're weak. I know people in town treat you like you're less, not because you are, but because they are. And I know," he added quietly, "that you deserve better." Her breath caught. "Why? Why do you see all that?" "Because I've watched people my whole life," he said. "And you're one of the rare ones." Clara looked away, overwhelmed by the sincerity in his voice. She had heard plenty of compliments in her life, but they were usually about her cooking or her kindness, not about her worth. Elias stood and extended his hand. Clara hesitated, then placed her hand in his. He helped her to her feet. and for a moment they stood so close Clara could hear the steady rhythm of his breathing. "I should get you home," he said, though he didn't step back. Clara lowered her gaze. "Thank you for helping me." "You do enough helping," Elias replied. "Someone should help you for once." The walk back was quiet but not uncomfortable. Clara felt strangely at ease around him, safe, like she didn't have to shrink herself to fit somewhere. She didn't belong. But nearing town, the peace was interrupted. 3 women stood near the bakery, whispering loudly enough for their voices to carry. "So that's him," one said. "I can't believe he's wasting time on her." Them walking together, another hissed. "Does she think she has a chance?" Clara froze. Elias did too. The women didn't even try to hide their disdain. "She saved a kid and suddenly thinks she's the town's hero," one scoffed. "Maybe she jumped under that beam hoping for attention." Clara's stomach twisted painfully. She stepped back, instinctively moving away from Elias. "Why should I get inside?" Elias turned to her, his expression sharp with anger and disbelief. "We're going to let them talk about you like that?" "What choice do I have?" Clara whispered. His voice dropped to a low, steady rumble. "Hey, better one." He walked toward the women before Clara could stop him. She grabbed his sleeve, panicked. "Please, Elias, don't make it worse." But he gently removed her hand, shook his head, and kept walking. The women straightened as he approached, suddenly less confident. "You got something to say?" one of them asked nervously. Elias stood tall, unbothered. "Yeah." He glanced back at Clara, softening before turning back to the women. "Don't speak about her again," he said. "Not like that." "Not ever." The boldest woman crossed her arms. "And who are you to tell us what to say?" "The man who won't stand by while cruelty gets passed off as gossip." She scoffed. "Oh, she can't fight her own battles?" He stepped closer, not threatening, but solid, immovable. "She's fought battles every day of her life. You just don't see them because you're too busy judging her." The women fell silent. Elias continued, his voice deepening. "You're small, she's strong, and the world is better with her in it." They shrank under his gaze, their pettiness dissolving into embarrassment. Then he turned and walked back to Clara. Her eyes glistened, not with humiliation, but something else. Something she hadn't felt in years. Someone believed in her, fully, without conditions. Elias stopped in front of her, his voice soft again. I meant every word. Clara didn't trust her voice enough to speak. She nodded, blinking away. Tears she didn't want him to see. The sun dipped behind the mountains, casting long shadows across town. Oh. Elias stepped back, hands in his pockets. "I'll see you tomorrow," he said gently. "You will," Clara whispered. "Yeah," he replied with a quiet, reassuring smile. "I'm not going anywhere." And for the first time in a long time, Clara felt the world shift, slightly, just enough, toward hope. The next morning, the whole town woke up buzzing. What happened in the cafe the previous evening had spread like wildfire. Every whisper carried Lena's name, and every rumor tried to make sense of the mysterious mountain man who had stepped in with such quiet strength. Lena, however, woke with a different feeling, something she had not felt in years. Not because someone defended her, but because, for the first time, someone saw her without judgment. She walked to the local library where she volunteered. Her steps were lighter, her heart steadier. She tried to focus on shelving books, but her mind kept drifting back to the moment that man, Elias, looked at her like she mattered. Around noon, the library door opened, and a cold breeze entered with it. Lena didn't look up at first. Customers came and went all day, but then she heard a familiar voice, low and steady. "Miss Lena, I hope I'm not interrupting." Her heart jumped. She turned. There he was, Elias, the mountain man, standing awkwardly near the entrance like he wasn't sure he belonged in town buildings. His hat between his hands, shoulders massive and humble at the same time. No, not at all," she said, trying not to show how her pulse quickened. "What brings you here?" He stepped closer but kept a respectful distance. "I wanted to make sure you were all right after yesterday." Lena swallowed hard. No one had ever checked on her. Not once. "I'm fine. Better than fine, actually. Thanks to you." Elias shook his head. "No, ma'am. You were strong long before I walked in. I just nudged the room in the right direction." Something warm spread in her chest. Gentle, unexpected, healing. He looked around the library, noticing the way she handled the books with care. "You like stories?" he asked. "I love them," she said softly. They helped me escape when people here weren't very kind. Elias nodded like he understood that feeling all too well. I came to return something, he said, pulling out an old, leather-bound book from his coat. My mother read this to me before she passed. Thought maybe you'd appreciate it more than it's sitting in a dusty cabin. Lena hesitated, touched. I can't take this. It's precious to you. It'll be safer with you, he replied. And if you're willing, I'd like to come back, maybe talk more, maybe learn who you really are. Her breath caught. No one had ever asked to know her, not beyond her size, not beyond their gossip, not beyond their laughter. But Elias, he wasn't asking out of pity. He wasn't asking out of curiosity. He was asking because he genuinely wanted to see her. Before she could respond, the library door burst open. It was Marcy, Lena's old classmate and longtime tormentor. Oh no, Marcy sneered loudly. Are you two actually talking? This is Rich. Lena, sweetheart, men don't look at you unless it's a joke. And big guy, you could do so much better. But Marcy didn't get to finish. Elias turned his head slowly. His voice remained calm, but the fire in his eyes was unmistakable. If you don't respect her, then you don't respect me, and I don't stand around for disrespect. Marcy froze, cheeks burning, and stormed out, slamming the door behind her. Lena stared at him, shocked, grateful, overwhelmed. Wait, why do you care this much? She whispered. Elias looked at her like the answer was the simplest thing in the world. Because kindness should never be rare, he said. And because you deserve to be treated right. I can see that clear as day. Lena felt something inside her break, quietly, softly, something she had carried for years, the belief that she wasn't worthy of love, respect, or goodness. Her voice trembled. Elias, would you like to have tea sometime? Here? After my shift? He smiled, slow, warm, genuine. I'd like that very much, Miss Lena. And for the first time in her life, Lena realized something powerful. Sometimes one person can step into your world and change the way you see yourself forever. The days that followed felt unreal to Lena. Every afternoon, exactly at 4 o'clock, Elias would show up at the library. Always quiet, always gentle, always carrying some small thing he thought she might like. A wildflower, a polished stone from the river, a handmade wooden bookmark. He never tried to impress her. He never tried to win her. He simply showed up, and that alone made her world brighter. The town, however, couldn't stop talking. People whispered when they passed Lena on Main Street. Why her? He must be desperate. She probably tricked him. He'll leave once he realizes what she really looks like. Lena tried to ignore them, but hateful words cling like burrs, painful and stubborn. One evening, after closing the library, she found Elias waiting outside for her as usual. But this time, she didn't smile. Her shoulders were slumped, eyes shining with tears she tried to hide. Elias immediately noticed. Who hurt you? He asked softly. It's nothing, she whispered. He stepped closer. A Miss Lena, someone like you doesn't cry over nothing. That broke her. She covered her face with her hands as tears slipped free. It's stupid, she said shakily. The people keep saying you'll leave once you realize I'm not worth choosing. Elias' jaw clenched, not in anger at her, but at a town that had convinced a kind-hearted woman she was unlovable. Lena, he said firmly, look at me. She lifted her eyes slowly. I didn't come into your life because you're perfect by their standards, he said. I came because you're gentle and strong, and you see the world in a way most folks don't. Her breath hitched. But I'm not pretty. He shook his head. You're beautiful, he said simply. Well, not because of how you look, though I see beauty there too, but because of who you are, and I'd be a fool to walk away. Lena pressed a hand to her heart, overwhelmed. You really think that? Elias stepped closer, his voice deep and steady. I don't think it. I know it. Her tears turned to quiet, trembling relief. Before either of them could say more, footsteps echoed down the street. A group of men, some of the same ones who mocked her weeks ago, approached with smug grins. Well, if it ain't Beauty and the Beast, one of them sneered. The mountain man, you sure you want to hitch yourself to that? Elias positioned himself slightly in front of Lena, not aggressively, but protectively. Say what you want about me, he warned, his voice like distant thunder. But you don't insult her. The men laughed. Another stepped forward, puffing his chest. Or what? You'll scare us with your beard? Elias took one slow step forward. The laughter died instantly. I don't fight unless I must, he said. But I won't let anyone harm her. Not with fists, not with words. His calmness scared them more than anger ever could. One by one, they backed away, muttering curses as they disappeared into the night. When it was quiet again, Lena exhaled shakily. I'm sorry you had to deal with that, she whispered. Elias turned to her, his expression soft. I'd deal with far worse for someone who matters. She blinked. As someone who matters. You do, he said. More than you know. Lena's heart felt like it might burst. No one had ever fought for her. No one had ever stayed. No one had ever chosen her. Not once in her entire life. But Elias wasn't just choosing her. He was honoring her. He reached out, hesitated only a moment, then gently took her hand. Elena, I don't know what the future holds, but if you're willing, I'd like to walk it with you. Silence. Then a single breathless word. As they stood together under the quiet glow of the street lamp, Lena realized something she had long forgotten. Love doesn't come to the perfect. Love comes to the sincere. And sometimes it arrives in the form of a quiet mountain man who sees what everyone else overlooked.